Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, industrial cannibalism. I'm doing a review of Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Bazterrica. So this is one of the books I'm reading for my Disturbing Books project, where I'm reading books that were suggested in the comments on my video review of Notice by Heather Lewis. So this is a book that has caused a big splash recently. It's a book you see talked about a lot, and a lot of people really, really rate it. And I have to say, I thought it was very good indeed. It is a disturbing book, definitely, but I certainly didn't find it as disturbing as I expected to. It is very, very interesting though, so let me get into it a bit and tell you what I liked about it. So as you probably know, if you've heard about this book, it's a book that's set in a kind of dystopian near future where human beings are farmed for their meat. So there has been a virus that has caused all animals on Earth to become infected with something that makes their meat poisonous to humans. So, we can't eat animals anymore, and gradually over time we have decided that we should be eating people instead. And this is really about the industrialization of that process. So the main character is a guy who works in the kind of meat processing industry, and you get to learn all about the kind of intricacies of how everything works in this new world through his eyes. So there's a lot of stuff about how livestock, humans, livestock are reared, about kind of the leather industry, about different cuts of meat, how meat is advertised and things like that. Agustina Bazterrica really goes into every possible detail you could think about this new world. She does a wonderful job of that kind of world building, and really thinking about all of the implications of I suppose government approved cannibalism. So it's a really, really interesting book from that perspective. And the book it reminded me of the most when I was reading it was Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, in terms of that sense of creating a new world which is in many ways very different from our world, but also in some ways recognisable, and giving you a central character who is kind of sympathetic but kind of not, to lead you through that world. So it's very much the main character's story that we follow in here, and his kind of changing perceptions and reactions as he starts to doubt this this industry that he's involved in, and starts to see the downside of it. The downside of it, that sounds terrible, doesn't it? But you know what I mean. He starts to question everything that's going on. But is it disturbing? So it is disturbing, in that, but for me, it's kind of not really much more disturbing than the concept, if you see what I mean. So as soon as you know what the concept is, and everyone who's heard of this book knows what the concept is, you can kind of, to an extent, imagine what happens in the book. And because it's filtered through this one character's perception, there's never that much detail. So she, Agustina Bazterrica has thought about everything that could possibly be involved in this, kind of new world, this new industry. But what she doesn't do is give you loads of really graphic detail. So you learn about what is happening, but there's kind of a filter there between you and the events. It's, to some extent, it's almost like hearing about terrible things that have happened on the news, in that you can conceptualise that they are awful and you can feel sympathy for the people involved, but the news always has that kind of filter, doesn't it? So you don't get completely sucked into it in the same way as you do, when you're watching a movie or a documentary or something like that that's more in depth. You don't really tap into the personal feelings of the victims of the tragedies that you see on the news in the same way that you would do in a novel. And that's why I didn't find this as disturbing as a book like Notice, which is a much more kind of personal book that talks much more about the impact of the events on the main character. So in this book, because the main character is part of the problem, if you like, you don't learn about what it's like to be a human that is being farmed for meat. You learn what it's like to be someone who's involved in that industry. So there's that distance there between you and the real horror of what is going on. But that said, it's a really, really good book, and the ending in particular is fantastic. There's a kind of it's called in one of the reviews on the back here a gut punch ending, and it really is. I thought the ending was brilliant, and did go some way to making it more of a disturbing book than it had been to that point. But I think what Agustina Bazterrica has done here is really interesting, because on the one hand it's an analysis of the global meat industry that we are, almost all of us are complicit in today. So I eat meat, and I eat meat knowing that animals don't necessarily live in fantastic conditions during the life that they had, and that they are industrially reared and kept and fed in order purely to make meat for me. And I know that that's clearly not good for the animals and not great for the planet either. It's not a particularly efficient way of using our resources. But I think the other side of this book is about humanity's ability to ignore the impacts of our actions on other people when it's convenient for us to do so. So it's all about that kind of convenience thing where, you can go to your local supermarket and buy a t-shirt for £3, which you will wear once, and then maybe never wear again, and that t-shirt has been made by probably a child in Asia somewhere, working for peanuts. And I think we are all complicit in that kind of global industrialisation of things, which exploits people in less well-off countries to make life easier and more convenient and cheaper for people in very wealthy countries. And I really thought that came through in this book, that the ability of the people in the book to ignore the fact that the meat they're consuming is human, and to ignore all the suffering that goes into the production of that meat. The way they talk about the livestock humans in this book is completely different from the way they talk about each other. And there's even like a third tier, if you like, of humans. So you've got kind of the wealthy humans that the main character is part of that society. You've got the humans that are reared for meat, and then you've got these kind of outcast humans who are, but effectively, the poor, who are desperate to get hold of meat, but can't afford it because the meat that's produced through this industry is very expensive. So there's this real kind of stratification of the society in the book, which I think very much mirrors, society in our own world. So yeah, a really interesting and thought-provoking book. Not, as I say, as disturbing as I expected it to be, perhaps, but still very, very effective and definitely worth reading. Okay, time for a random book from the shelves. I thought I'd go with something completely different. So this is Force of Nature by Christina Cook, which is a Harlequin NASCAR romance, which I read a little while ago. So I bought a box of these off eBay a while ago, 30 odd of them, and I'm slowly working my way through them. They are very cheesy, but a lot of fun. I do enjoy a good trashy romance. So yeah, something completely different from the shelves after the kind of grim horriblism of Tender is the Flesh. So I hope you found that interesting. Do let me know in the comments if you read Tender is the Flesh and what you thought of it, both as a work of disturbing fiction and as a book with a kind of deeper political meaning. As I say, I thought it was really interesting and very, very effective. As always, you can connect with me outside of YouTube on either my Discord server or on various social media channels. The links to all of those are in the About section for the channel. And as always, hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're really good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.